Welcome back to This is Thailand. Now, if you've been watching this channel for a while, you know the kind of stories we tell here, and most of the time you can kind of see it coming. The guy walks into a bar, he meets someone, the money starts moving, you know how it goes. But this one is a little different. This one is quieter. This one doesn't start in a bar or a nightclub or some flashy part of Pattaya. This one starts in a one-bedroom apartment in Trenton, New Jersey, with a man named Clyde who spent 38 years driving a truck and never once thought he'd end up in a story like this. Clyde is 65. He's not a drifter, he's not a party guy, he's not someone chasing a fantasy. He's just a man who worked his whole life, retired, and ended up in Thailand looking for something he couldn't quite name. And what happened to him there? Well, there's a moment in this story, a moment in the back of a taxi where Clyde heard something he was never supposed to hear, and it changed everything. This one's going to stick with you. Here's his story, in his own words. Yeah, okay, so, where do I start with this? I guess the honest answer is, I start with the truck. Because that's what everything is, right? That's the thing underneath all of it. 38 years. I started hauling freight when I was 27 years old out of a terminal in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and I didn't stop until I was 65. And I know what you're thinking. 38 years in a truck. Jesus. But here's the thing, it didn't feel like 38 years. That's the part nobody tells you about that kind of work. It just goes. One haul becomes the next one and the next one, and you're doing the math on fuel costs, and you're checking the weather in Pennsylvania, and you're pulling into a rest stop outside of Harrisburg at 2 in the morning, and somewhere in there, years just disappear. They don't feel like they're happening. They just happen. I ran the turnpike mostly, Jersey to Ohio, back and forth, sometimes up into New York, sometimes down into Virginia, the same roads, the same truck stops. I knew which diners had good coffee and which ones had bad coffee and which ones had coffee that was so bad it was almost interesting. I knew the CB channels the guys used on different stretches of highway. I knew where the way stations were and where the state troopers liked to sit. I knew that road the way you know your own apartment, maybe better. And the guys I drove with, or near or alongside, whatever you want to call it, some of them had lives, real lives. They had wives they were driving home to, kids they were sending money back to. I'd hear them on the CB sometimes, talking to their wives at night, just checking in. Hey honey, I'm outside of Columbus, I'll be home Thursday, that kind of thing. Normal stuff. And I listened to it every day for years, and I never once thought, I don't have that, I just didn't notice. It was like background noise, something other people had, not something I was missing, just something that didn't apply to me. I wasn't sad about it. And that was the problem. I didn't even know I was supposed to be sad. I never married, never came close, if I'm being straight with you. There were women here and there over the years, here and there, the way there are for any man who's moving around the country. But nothing that stuck. Nothing that lasted more than a few months. And I never sat down and asked myself why. I just assumed that was how it was going to go, and I kept driving, and the years kept adding up, and one day I was 65, and I was done. The pension was okay, not great, enough to cover the basics if you're careful about it. I moved into a one-bedroom in Trenton, small place, Quiet Street. I didn't need much. I'd spent decades not needing much. The apartment had a kitchen I barely used and a TV I watched too much, and a view of another building that I looked at every morning while I drank my coffee. And I had about $24,000 in savings. That was it. That was the number. $24,000 and a pension and a one-bedroom apartment, and nobody in the world who was expecting to hear from me on any given day. I want to be clear about something. I'm not telling you this to feel sorry for myself. I don't want that. I'm telling you this because you need to understand what I was carrying when I got on that plane. Not sadness, not depression, just this quiet, flat, kind of nothing. Like the road when there's no traffic and no weather and nothing on the radio. Just you and the engine and the miles going by. That's what my life felt like. And I didn't even know it was empty until someone showed me it could be something else. That came from a buddy of mine, a guy named Pete. We drove out of the same terminal back in the day, years and years ago. Pete had done a stint in Thailand a couple of years before I went. Phuket, I think. He wasn't there long, maybe 3 months, but he loved it. And after he got back, he wouldn't shut up about it. And then one day, maybe a month after I'd settled into the Trenton place, he starts sending me photos on my phone. Just random stuff. A beach. A plate of food that looked incredible. A cold beer sitting on a table with the ocean behind it. No message with most of them, just the photos. And I looked at them and I thought, that looks cheap. That looks warm. That looks like somewhere a guy could just sit for a while and not feel like he was taking up space. I called Pete that same week, asked him about it, and he walked me through it. The cost of living, the weather, the way people treated you. And I listened, and I took notes, the way I used to take notes on routes, and by the end of that phone call I was already looking at flights. I booked it inside a month. One way, 24 grand in my account, and a one-way ticket to Bangkok, and no idea what I was doing. But that's the thing. For the first time in a long time, I was actually going somewhere. Not passing through, going somewhere. So I landed in Bangkok on a Tuesday late afternoon, and the heat just hits you the second you walk out of Suvarnabhumi, like walking into a wall. I'd been in air conditioning for about 14 hours straight, the plane, the terminal, the whole thing, and then I step outside, and it's like someone opened an oven door right in my face. Thick air, heavy, and the smell. I don't know how to describe it exactly. Exhaust and food and something sweet underneath all of it. Like flowers, but not quite. It was nothing like New Jersey in February, nothing like anything I'd ever stepped into, really. I didn't have a plan beyond getting to the airport hotel and sleeping. Pete had told me Bangkok was a lot. Too much, he said, for a guy like me who just wanted to sit somewhere quiet. He'd suggested I not linger. Get in, get a connection, get out. So that's what I did. I stayed one night at a guest house near the airport, ate something from a street cart that I couldn't pronounce and couldn't identify but tasted better than anything I'd had in years, and the next morning I went back to the airport to figure out my next move. That's where Chiang Mai came from. I wasn't planning on it specifically. I was at the domestic terminal, looking at the board, trying to figure out where to go, and this older guy, another Farang, Western guy, maybe my age, maybe a bit older, he saw me standing there looking lost and he just said, "Where are you trying to get to?" And I said I wasn't sure yet. And he said, "Try Chiang Mai." He said it like it was obvious. He said Bangkok is for guys who want the party. Chiang Mai is for guys who want to actually live somewhere. And that distinction made sense to me right away. I didn't want the party. I wanted somewhere I could sit down and stay for a while without feeling like I was in the middle of a highway on ramp. So I booked it that same morning, flew up in about an hour, and Chiang Mai, from the second I got off that plane, it felt different. Smaller, quieter. The airport itself was small. I grabbed a taxi, a real taxi, not a tuk-tuk, and asked the driver to take me somewhere near the old city where I could find a guest house. He nodded like this was the most normal request in the world. And it probably was. The guest house was nothing special. A small place just inside the old city walls, run by a Thai couple who barely spoke English but were friendly about it. My room was about the size of a shipping container. A bed, a fan, a window that looked out onto a little courtyard with a mango tree. The rent was about 6,000 baht a month. That's less than 170. I almost laughed when they told me. Back in Trenton, I was paying 1,100 a month for a place that smelled like the previous tenant's cooking and had a view of a brick wall. This was something else entirely. The first few days, I just walked. That was it. That was my whole routine. I'd wake up, get coffee somewhere, and walk. The old city has these lanes and little alleys, and you can spend hours in them and not see the same thing twice. The temples, the Wats, they're everywhere. Gold paint catching the light. Monks in orange robes moving through the streets in the mornings. The sound of bells sometimes early, before the heat really kicks in. Street food carts on every other corner. Guys grilling mu ping, satay, all of it smelling incredible. I'd buy whatever looked good. Sit on a plastic stool on the side of the road and eat it watching the motorbikes go by. And nobody looked at me twice. Nobody cared that I was there. I wasn't invisible exactly. It was more like I was allowed to be there. Like I had a right to take up space. That might sound like a small thing. It wasn't. Not for me. Not after years of feeling like I was just another piece of cargo moving from point A to point B. I want to be clear about something. I was not there looking for a woman. I know how that sounds. Every guy in every one of these stories says that. But I mean it. I'd spent enough time on the forums before I left, reading the posts, the warnings, the whole thing. I knew the reputation. I knew what guys got into over here. I specifically did not want that. I wanted cheap rent and warm weather and somewhere I could make my money last. That was it. That was the whole plan, such as it was. The cafe was an accident, or it felt like one anyway. It was about a week and a half in. I found a few spots I liked for coffee and I was rotating between them, just out of habit, the way you do. This one was near the Sunday walking street, which on a weekday was just a regular street. Nothing fancy about the place. A few small tables outside, a counter, a couple of people sitting around, not a tourist spot. The tourists were all down on Niman, or near the night bazaar. This was a local place that happened to have a few foreigners who'd figured out it was good. I went in for the coffee, that's all. I sat outside at one of the tables with my phone and my Chang, because by then I'd figured out that a cold Chang in the afternoon was basically the perfect thing, and I wasn't paying much attention to anything. And then at some point I went back inside to order another one, and I tried to say something in Thai. I'd been picking up a few words here and there, just from being around, just from the menus and the street vendors. Nothing real. But I tried to say something, maybe thank you, maybe something about the coffee, and I butchered it completely. And the woman behind the counter, she looked at me, and she smiled, and she said something back in Thai that I didn't understand, but the tone of it was clear. She was laughing at me. Not mean about it, just, You know, the way someone laughs when a kid mispronounces a word, gentle about it. Her name was Nong. I didn't know that yet. I didn't know anything about her yet. We talked for maybe 10 minutes. She spoke decent English, better than I expected, and I spoke zero Thai, and we just talked. About the coffee, about the heat, about nothing. And then I paid, and I left, and I walked back to my guest house, and I didn't think about it again until the next day. But I went back the next day, and the day after that, and looking back now, I know that's where it started, not with any big moment, not with fireworks or anything dramatic, just a small joke in a small cafe on a quiet street. That was the door. And I walked right through it without even realizing it was there. Now here's the thing I want you to understand about what happened next. And I'm going to take my time with this part, because the timing of it is everything. The timing is literally the whole thing. If Non had come on fast, if she'd been all over me in the first week, if the money stuff had started right away, I would have seen it coming from a mile away. I'm not a stupid man. I spent 38 years reading the road. You learn to see things coming when your life depends on it. But she didn't do any of that. She did the opposite. She did nothing. And that's what made it work. I went back to the cafe the next day after that first conversation, and the day after that. By the end of the first week, I was there almost every afternoon. Sometimes I'd sit outside with a Chang and just read my phone. Sometimes I'd go in and talk to her for a few minutes while she worked. It was never a big deal, never felt like a big deal. She was behind the counter doing her job, and I was a regular customer who happened to talk to her sometimes. That was all it was. We didn't exchange numbers for over 2 weeks. 2 weeks. I want you to think about that for a second. In this day and age, when every guy I know back home would have a girl's number in the first 5 minutes, we talked almost every day for 2 weeks, and neither one of us brought up phones or line or any of it. It just happened naturally one afternoon. She mentioned something about a Thai holiday coming up, some event near the old city, and she said I should come see it, and then she pulled out her phone and we put each other's numbers in. Like it was an afterthought, like it didn't matter. But it did matter. Obviously it mattered. I'm just telling you how it felt at the time. It felt like nothing. It felt easy. The conversation started filling in over those weeks, not all at once. Piece by piece, she told me about her mother first. An older woman, lived with Nong in a small place outside the city. Had some health problems, nothing she specified right away, just general stuff, getting older, you know how it is. She told me about her younger brother, studying at a school in Chiang Mai, 15, 16, something like that. She wanted him to finish school and get a decent job. She told me about her own classes, hospitality management, part-time, at one of the universities in the city. She wanted to work in a hotel someday, maybe travel. She said it with this quiet kind of hope that didn't sound like bragging or complaining, it just sounded like a life. And I want to be honest with you here. None of this felt like a pitch. I know that's what you're thinking. I know that's what I should have been thinking. But when you're sitting across from someone in the late afternoon heat, the air smelling like grilled meat from the cart down the street, a Leo beer sweating in your hand, and she's telling you about her brother's school grades, it doesn't sound like a setup. It sounds like a person talking to another person. That's the thing about a good con. You never hear the machinery. You just hear the voice. She disagreed with me sometimes. That's the detail I kept coming back to later when I was trying to figure out where it all went sideways. Because in every story I'd read online, every warning, every forum post, the woman was always agreeable, always sweet, always yes. Nong wasn't like that. She had opinions. She told me once that I was wrong about something, I don't even remember what, some small thing. And she said it straight, not rude about it, just direct. And I remember thinking, okay, she's a real person, she's got her own head. This isn't what the guys on the forums were talking about. Looking back now, I know that could have been part of it too. Could have been another layer, but at the time, it felt like proof. Proof that this was different. Proof that I wasn't falling into the thing everyone warned you about. The first money thing happened around the end of week 4, maybe the start of week 5. We were sitting together one evening, not at the cafe, somewhere else. I think it was a little suntan place near Niman, the kind of spot where you sit on a plastic stool and the food comes out in 30 seconds and costs almost nothing. And she was telling me about her mother again, more specific this time. Her mother needed a procedure, not surgery exactly, something smaller than that, but it cost money and they didn't have it and the hospital wanted it up front. She wasn't asking me for anything. I want to be real clear about that. She was just telling me, the way you tell someone something that's weighing on you. And I offered, before she even finished the sentence, I said, how much do you need? And she told me, about 12,000 baht. That's roughly 350. And I said, okay, no problem. And I meant it. It wasn't even a decision. It just came out. And here's the part that one kept thinking about for a long time afterward. After I gave her the money, she thanked me. Quietly. Genuinely, as far as I could tell. And then she didn't bring it up again. Not the next day, not the day after that. For almost a week, she didn't mention it at all. No updates on the mother's procedure, no follow-up, no gratitude speeches. She just moved on. Like it had happened and it was done, and that was that. I remember thinking about that. Specifically thinking about it. Because everything I'd read said that the first ask was always the test. You give a little, and if you do, they push for more right away. They keep the pressure on. They keep reminding you of the goodness you showed them so you feel obligated to keep showing it. But Nong did the opposite. She let it go. And that felt more real than anything else she'd done up to that point. That silence afterward. That was what convinced me. I told myself, okay, this is different. This isn't the thing. This is just a person who needed help, and I helped her, and that's what decent people do for each other. And I felt good about it. I felt like maybe, for once in my life, I was on the right side of something. Like I was being useful to somebody who actually needed me. And I'll tell you something. That feeling, that right there, that was worth more to me than the 12,000 baht. That was worth more than anything I had in my account. And I think she knew that. Looking back now, I think she knew exactly what that feeling was worth to a man like me. And she let me have it. For a while. So around week 6, maybe a little after, Nong brought up the idea of moving in together. And I want to tell you exactly how she did it, because the way she did it mattered. It wasn't romantic about it. It wasn't, hey, let's take this to the next level or anything like that. It was practical. She said something like, you're paying rent over there and I'm paying rent over here, and if we just shared a place, it would be cheaper for both of us. That's it. That was the pitch. Pure math. And I sat there and I thought about it for maybe 10 seconds and I said, yeah, that makes sense. Because it did make sense. I was still tracking my money back then, still watching the bat, still thinking about how long my savings needed to last. And she was right. 2 places cost more than 1 place. It was the kind of calculation I'd been making my whole life. Fuel costs, route margins, where to park overnight to save on fees. She'd framed it the way I thought about things and it worked. We found a place together about a week later. Still in Chiang Mai, not far from where I'd been staying. A little apartment, 1 bedroom, a small kitchen, a balcony that looked out over a lane where the food carts set up in the mornings. The smell of pad thai and grilled chicken drifting up first thing. Rent was about 8,500 baht a month. That's maybe 240. Split between us, it was nothing. I didn't feel like I was making a big commitment. I felt like I was being smart about money. The village came about 2 weeks after we moved in. That's when everything started to shift. Though I didn't feel it shifting at the time. Nong said she wanted me to meet her mother, her family. She said it casually, the way you'd suggest trying a new restaurant. And I said sure, of course. Why wouldn't I? So we took a Song Dae out of the city one Saturday morning, about 45 minutes, maybe an hour, depending on traffic. The village was small. A cluster of houses with tin roofs and wooden fences, surrounded by rice paddies that were starting to dry out in the heat, dogs sleeping in the shade of doorways. A few kids on motorbikes, the kind of place that felt like it hadn't changed much in a long time. Quiet. Dusty. The air smelled different out there. Earthy, green, less exhaust, more soil. And when we walked into her mother's house, that's when I first felt it. That feeling of being somewhere I was supposed to be. The mother was sitting in the main room, a small woman, maybe 65, maybe older, and she stood up when she saw me and did the way, hands pressed together, slight bow, and the look on her face was something I haven't seen directed at me in a very long time. Gratitude. Real, open gratitude. Like I'd already done something important just by showing up. They fed me. God, did they feed me. Sticky rice, some tam, some kind of stewed chicken that was so good I almost said something out loud. The whole family was there. Aunts, cousins, the younger brother, Nong's brother, a kid who looked about 16 and couldn't stop staring at me like I was some kind of curiosity. Everyone was friendly. Everyone was warm. And I sat there on a plastic mat on the floor of that little house eating food that cost almost nothing to make, and I thought, this is what it feels like. This is what a family feels like. I want to pause here for a second, because I know how this sounds to you watching this. I know you're sitting there thinking, okay, Clyde, come on. You're a 65-year-old man who's never had a family, and you walk into one room and suddenly everyone's your best friend, and you don't think that's a little convenient. And yeah, I get it. Looking back, I get it. But you weren't there. You didn't feel what I felt sitting in that room. I'd never been welcomed like that. Not once. Not in 65 years. The village trips became regular after that first one. Every week at first, then sometimes twice a week. And each time I went, the family was there. The same warmth, the same food, the same feeling of being the important one in the room. And each time, somewhere in the visit, a small thing would come up. Not every time. Not in a way that felt like a pattern, just here and there. The motorbike was the first one. Nong's brother needed one for school. It made sense. The village was spread out and public transport was basically non-existent. She mentioned it one evening after we got back from a visit, and I said how much. About 21,000 baht. That's roughly 600. I said okay. Done. Didn't think twice. Then about 2 weeks later, a cousin's wedding. Nong mentioned they needed to contribute something, and she asked if I could help with a bit of it. About 15,000 baht, around 450. I handed it over without a conversation about it. It was just what you did. That's what I told myself. This is how it works here. Family takes care of family. I'd read that enough times online to know it was true. The tailor shop was next. Non's mother had this little business, barely running, making clothes for local people. She needed some new fabric, some equipment fixed. Nong said it would be about 28,000 baht. That's close to 800. And she framed it as an investment, kind of. She said, if the shop does better, the whole family does better. And I thought, yeah, that tracks. That makes sense. Then the follow-up for the mother. Another medical thing, doubt 8,000 baht, about 500. I didn't even ask what it was for exactly. I just sent it. So if you're keeping track, and I wasn't at that point, not really, not carefully, I was up to about $6,500 gone out of my 24,000. And every single one of those felt like a one-off. None of them felt like a pattern. Each one had its own reason, its own context, its own moment. They were spread out over weeks. They came wrapped in conversation and laughter and sticky rice and the sound of kids playing outside. It didn't feel like I was losing money. It felt like I was spending it on something that mattered. But there were things, small things, things I noticed and filed away somewhere in the back of my head and then didn't look at again. The way Non's phone screen would flip away from me whenever she got a message. Not every time, just sometimes. Enough that I noticed it more than once. And there was a cousin, one of the women at the village dinners, who had this way of looking at me when Nong was talking, like she knew something funny, like there was a joke I wasn't in on. I noticed that too, but I didn't sit with it. I didn't pull on it, because everything else felt so right that those little things had no weight. They were just noise on the road. And when you're finally driving somewhere that feels like home, you don't pull over to check the noise. One night, about 2 weeks into this stretch, I asked Nong directly. We were lying in bed, the fan turning overhead, the window open and the sounds of the lane coming in, motorbikes somewhere in the distance, a dog barking. And I just said it. I said, is this okay? Am I doing too much? And she turned to me and she smiled and she said, Clyde, you don't have to worry about that. You are a good man, good heart. That is why I am here. And I'll never forget the way she said it. Quiet, sincere. Like she meant every word. Looking back now, I understand what happened in that moment. She heard the real question underneath the one I asked. The real question wasn't, am I spending too much money? The real question was, am I being played? And she answered that one. She answered it perfectly. She just didn't answer it honestly. Here's something I never thought I'd say about myself. In 38 years of driving a truck, I never once lost track of the money. Not once. You can't, in that line of work. Every mile costs something. Fuel, wear on the tires, the tolls, the food, all of it adds up. And if you're not watching it, you're bleeding out without knowing it. It was the one discipline I had. The one thing I was actually good at. Keeping the math straight. And somewhere around week 15, I stopped doing it. I didn't notice at first. That's the thing. It wasn't a decision. It wasn't like I sat down one morning and said, okay, Clyde, you're done counting now. It just happened. Quietly. The way a lot of bad things happen. You're going along, and you feel fine, and then one day you look up, and you've drifted off the road, and you don't even remember when it started. The reason I stopped was simple. I was happy. And I know that sounds like the stupidest thing a man can say in a story like this. Trust me, I know. But I was. Genuinely happy, the kind of happy I hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. I had someone to wake up next to. I had somewhere to go on the weekends. I had a family that smiled when I walked into the room. I had a life, an actual life with texture and warmth and noise and other people in it. And compared to that, the money just felt like a number. Just a number on a screen in my bank app that I checked less and less often. The requests kept coming during this stretch. And they were bigger now. Not dramatically bigger. Not in a way that would have set off an alarm if I'd been paying attention. Just incrementally. Enough that each one still felt manageable on its own. The land was the first big one. Nong brought it up one evening after dinner. There was a small plot near the village, she said. Not much. Dry land, not good for rice, but the family had been talking about buying it for a long time. If they had it, they could build something on it eventually. Maybe a shop. Maybe just keep it in the family. She said the price was about 100,000 baht. That's roughly 4,000. She wasn't asking me to buy it outright. She said maybe I could put down a deposit, help get it started, the rest they'd figure out. I said yes. Just like that. Didn't ask what kind of land. Didn't ask who the seller was. Didn't ask if the title was clean or what the paperwork looked like. A man who'd been a truck driver for 38 years. A man who knew that every deal had fine print. Didn't ask a single question. I just said, yeah, okay, how much do you need now? and she said maybe 60,000 baht to start, about 1,700. I sent it that same week. Then there was a legal thing. One of Nong's relatives, she didn't say exactly who at first, had some kind of trouble, something with a neighbor, a boundary dispute or something like that. They needed a lawyer. She said it would cost about 50,000 baht, around 1,400. She said it was a loan. She'd pay it back once the thing was sorted out. I didn't ask what the thing was. I didn't ask which relative. I sent the money. There were other smaller things in between that I can't even fully account for now. Bits here and there. A contribution to something at the school. A repair on the house in the village. Things that came up in conversation and I said yes to without really hearing myself say it. By the time this stretch was over, I'd spent another $4,500, maybe $5,000 on top of everything from before, which put me somewhere around 11,000 gone total. Almost half of everything I had. And I didn't know that, not exactly, because I had stopped looking. But here's the thing. Even while I was stopped looking at the money, something else was starting. Something underneath. Something I didn't fully understand at the time, but I can see now, looking back, was the first crack in the glass. Nong started being less available. Not a lot. Not in a way I could point to and say, there, that's when it changed. It was subtle. She'd be tired in the evenings when she used to want to sit on the balcony and talk. She'd have errands she needed to run and she'd go alone. Her phone would ring and she'd step out of the room to take the call. Small things. Normal things, probably, in any relationship. I told myself that. I told myself, this is just how it goes. People have their own lives. She's not attached to me at the hip. That's fine. That's healthy, actually. But something in me noticed. Some quiet part of me that had spent decades alone in a cab reading the road. Some part that knew when the engine sounded different even if you couldn't say exactly how. That part noticed. And it didn't let go. That's when I started learning Thai. I told myself it was because I wanted to connect more. To the place, to her world, to the village. And that was part of it. But if I'm being straight with you, and that's what I'm here to do, there was something else underneath it. A feeling, not a suspicion exactly. More like an instinct. The kind of thing a trucker gets when the road ahead doesn't look quite right, but you can't see why yet. You don't pull over, you don't slam the brakes, you just start paying closer attention. I downloaded an app, one of those language learning things, Duolingo or something like it. I did it at night, after Nong was asleep. 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Just the basics. Numbers. Common phrases. Words I heard at the shops and the market. I practiced with the guy who ran the noodle cart near our place. He thought it was hilarious, this big Farang trying to order cow pad and broken Thai, but he was patient about it. Helped me out. Corrected me. I kept at it every night. Nong found out about it. About a week in. Not the app specifically, just that I was trying to pick up some Thai. And I remember her reaction because it stuck with me. She didn't laugh about it the way the noodle cart guy did. She didn't encourage it. She just kind of shook her head and said, don't bother with that. It's too hard. You won't need it. Just let me translate for you. At the time, I thought nothing of it. She was probably right. Thai is hard. My progress was slow. And she was always there to help me with anything I needed to say or understand. But looking back now, I know that was the moment. That right there. The hair on the back of my neck should have stood up when she said that. Don't bother learning Thai. Let me be the one who understands everything in this world for you. Let me be the only one who knows what's being said. I should have heard that for what it was. But I didn't. Not yet. That came later. In the back of a taxi, on a road outside Chiang Mai, when the words I'd been quietly teaching myself for weeks finally meant something I was never supposed to hear. Okay. This is the part 1-4. I've been building up to this for a while now, and I know you know it's coming. You knew it was coming from the first minute of this video. The taxi. That's the whole thing. That's why we're here. So let me take my time with it, because I've replayed this moment in my head more times than I can count since it happened, and every time I replay it I notice something new. The detail I missed before, a sound, the way the light looked. I want to get it right. It was a Saturday late afternoon. Nong and I had been out at the village for most of the day, the usual thing. Food with the family, sitting around, the mother asking me questions through Nong, the brother showing me something on his phone, normal stuff. And when it was time to go, we grabbed a taxi back into the city. Not a Song the IU this time. A proper taxi. One of those white sedans you see all over Chiang Mai. The driver was an older guy. Maybe 60, maybe older. I'd seen him before, actually. We'd taken his taxi a few times over the past couple of weeks. He knew us by sight, he knew where we lived. He'd smile when we got in and we'd wave, and that was about it. We didn't talk much. My Thai wasn't good enough for a real conversation, and he didn't speak much English. But he was a quiet, patient guy. I liked him. So we get in, me in the back on one side, Nong on the other. The air conditioning is going. It's that thick, late afternoon heat outside, the kind where everything looks a little hazy, the light coming through the windshield all golden and heavy. And I'm scrolling on my phone. just looking at nothing really. And Nong is looking out the window. And then her phone rings. She pulls it out and looks at the screen and answers it in Thai, which is normal. She always answered her calls in Thai when they came in. I never thought anything of it. And she starts talking, fast, casual, like she's talking to someone she talks to every day, which, looking back, she probably was. Now here's where I need you to understand something. By this point, my Thai was better than anyone around me knew it was, better than Nong knew. I'd been at it for weeks, every night, every morning at the noodle cart, practicing with shopkeepers, listening to the radio in taxis, picking up words and phrases and filing them away one by one. I wasn't fluent, not even close. But I was functional. I could follow a conversation if it wasn't too fast and the words weren't too complicated. And this conversation wasn't complicated. I kept my eyes on my phone. I didn't move. I didn't change my expression. I just listened. And what I heard was this. Nong was talking to her sister. I knew it was her sister because she said the name early on. And the tone of the conversation was nothing like the tone Nong used with me. There was no warmth in it, no softness. It was flat, businesslike, the way you talk about a transaction, about something you were wrapping up. She said the money was getting low. She used a word I'd learned at the market, a word for running out of something, like a jug being emptied. She said it was time to think about finishing, about making a clean end to it. She talked about creating a reason, something that would make sense, something that wouldn't make me ask too many questions or cause trouble. She was calm about all of it, calm the way someone is calm when they're talking about something routine, something they've done before or thought about doing many times. I sat there and I listened to every word and my face didn't move, not a muscle. And I want to tell you something about that. It wasn't bravery. It wasn't some kind of stoic act. It was something else entirely. It was the feeling of watching the ground disappear underneath you and not being able to do a single thing about it. My body just went still. The way it goes still when you're in a rig, and something happens on the road ahead, and there's nothing left to do but watch it happen. And then the driver looked up, just for a second, just a quick glance in the rearview mirror, and his eyes found mine, not Nong's, mine. He'd been listening too. He understood what she was saying, and he understood that I understood what she was saying. And in that 1 second, we both knew it. And he mouthed 2 words to me, 2 words in Thai, quiet, deliberate, like he'd been waiting for the right moment to say them. Sib et, finish him, not a threat, not something violent. It was a warning. It was this man, this stranger who'd driven us around for weeks, looking at me in his mirror and telling me in 2 words exactly what was happening, exactly what I was sitting in the middle of. He was giving me the thing I needed, the confirmation, the thing that turned a feeling into a fact. I nodded, just barely, just enough for him to see. And he turned his eyes back to the road and didn't look again. Nong hung up about 2 minutes later. She put her phone away and turned to me and smiled. That smile. The one I'd seen 100 times. The one that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. And she said, "You okay? You quiet today?" And I said, "Yeah, just tired." And she nodded and turned back to the window, and we drove the rest of the way in silence. I didn't say anything that night, not one word about what I'd heard. We got home and she made dinner, cow pad, the simple fried rice she made when she didn't feel like going out, and we ate it at the small table by the balcony and she talked about something, I don't even remember what. And I listened and I nodded and I smiled when I was supposed to smile. And then we went to bed and she fell asleep, and I lay there in the dark with the fan turning overhead and the sounds of the lane coming in through the window. And I stared at the ceiling for a very long time. Because here's the thing about sitting in a cab for 38 years. You learn how to sit with something heavy. You learn how to hold it inside you without letting it show, without letting it crack anything on the outside. You just carry it, down the road, mile after mile, until you figure out what to do with it. The next morning I waited until Nong left the apartment. Then I sat down with my phone, and I opened my bank app, and I started going through everything. Every transfer, every withdrawal, every amount, dates, amounts, who I'd given it to, and when, and what it was supposed to be for. I wrote it all down on a piece of paper, the old-fashioned way, because something about putting it on paper made it real in a way the phone screen didn't. It took me about 2 hours, and by the end of it, the picture was there, all of it, laid out in front of me in black and white, every single one. And it was exactly what I already knew it was. It had been exactly that all along. I just hadn't been willing to see it. People ask me sometimes when I tell this story, why didn't you confront her? Why didn't you sit her down and put it to her and see what she said? And I get why they ask that. It's what you're supposed to do, right? That's the move, the dramatic move. The one where you lay it all out and watch their face and get your answers, and maybe even get some of your money back. But that's not how I'm wired, and it's not how this works, not here, not in Thailand. I'd read enough by that point to know that confronting someone like Nong wouldn't have given me anything useful. No confession, No tearful apology, no money back. What it would have given me was a scene, a loss of face for both of us. And in my experience, and I say this as a man who spent decades negotiating with dispatchers and fuel suppliers and every kind of difficult person you can think of, when you take away someone's ability to save face, you don't get the truth. You just get a wall. So I didn't confront her. I did something else instead. I did what I'd been doing my whole life when a situation on the road turned bad. I got quiet, I made a plan, and I moved. The timing worked out because of the village. Nong went out there on a Wednesday, said she'd be staying overnight with her mother. That happens sometimes. Not every time, but often enough that it wasn't unusual. And when she left that morning, kissed me on the cheek the way she always did, said she'd be back Thursday. I stood on that balcony and watched her go down the lane, and I knew that was the last time I was going to see her. I spent that Wednesday packing. There wasn't much to pack. I hadn't brought a lot with me when I came to Thailand, and I hadn't bought much while I was here. A bag of clothes, a couple of books, my phone charger, my passport, the piece of paper with all the numbers written on it, the one I'd made the morning after the taxi. I folded that up and put it in my jacket pocket. I don't know why. I just didn't want to throw it away. I moved out of the apartment in about 4 hours, cleaned up the kitchen, made the bed, left the key on the counter with a note that just said thank you, 2 words. I thought about writing more. I thought about saying something that would let her know I knew, but I didn't. There was no point. And honestly, I didn't trust myself to write it without it sounding angry or hurt, and I didn't want to give her that. I didn't want her to have any part of me that she could use or laugh about or tell her sister about later. I went to a guest house near the airport that first night, paid cash, about 500 baht for the room. Sat on the bed in the dark for a while, just listening to the traffic outside and the air conditioning rattling. And I thought about calling Pete, my buddy back home, the one who'd started all this. But I didn't. What was I going to say? You were right, it was a bad idea. I lost $11,000 to a woman in Chiang Mai? I wasn't ready to say that out loud yet. I booked the flight the next morning, one way back to the States, Bangkok to Newark. It cost me about $580. I sat in the airport and I ate a pad thai from one of the little stalls near the gate. And I drank a Chang and I watched the planes and I tried not to think too much about anything. And then I got on the plane and I flew home, and that was that. I didn't go to the police before I left. I want to address that directly because I know some of you are thinking it. But here's the reality of it. I looked into it, briefly the morning after the taxi when I was still in that numb place where you consider every option. And what I found out from reading online, from talking to a couple of other expats I'd met, was this. Thai law doesn't really cover what happened to me. There's no crime here, not one the Thai police are going to pursue for a foreign guy who voluntarily sent money to a Thai woman over the course of several months. No contract was signed. No one put a gun to my head. From a legal standpoint, I just gave money to someone I was in a relationship with, and it turned out the relationship wasn't what I thought it was. That's not fraud in any way that matters here. That's just life. So I left. And I came home to Trenton, to the same one-bedroom apartment I'd left from, the same view of the other building, the same quiet. The numbers are what they are. About 390,000 baht gone. $11,200, give or take. Out of the 24,000 I started with, I've got about 6,200 left in savings. The pension covers the rent and the food and the basics. I'm not going to starve, but I'm not going to do much of anything else either. Not for a long time, maybe not ever. And I want to be honest about what that costs. Not just the money is just a number. The real cost was something else. The real cost was that for about 2 months I felt like I was finally living a real life. Like I'd finally gotten off the highway and found somewhere to stop. And that feeling, that was real. Even if everything around it was fake, that feeling was real. And losing it hurt worse than losing the money. A lot worse. But here's what I figured out. Sitting in this apartment back in Trenton, turning it over in my head night after night. The con wasn't that she pretended to love me. Any guy who's been around the block knows that one. The con was something smarter than that. The con was that she made me believe I was the kind of man someone could love, that I was worth choosing, that I was worth staying for. She built that belief up in me piece by piece, the same way she built up everything else, and by the time it was done, I couldn't see it for what it was. That was the expensive part. That right there. And I think about the taxi driver sometimes, the old guy with the quiet hands on the wheel. I never saw him again after I left. I don't even know his name. But he looked at me in that mirror and he told me the truth in 2 words when nobody else was going to. And I owe him something for that. I don't know what, maybe just this. Maybe just telling the story so that somebody else, somebody like me, somebody who spent too long on the road and doesn't know what it feels like to be chosen, maybe that somebody hears it before they end up in the back of their own taxi. That's all I got. That's the whole thing. And that, folks, is Clyde's story. Sitting here, after everything you've just heard, I think the thing that stays with me is how quiet it all was. There was no big dramatic moment at the start, no obvious warning sign flashing in neon. It was just a man who was lonely and a woman who knew exactly what to do with that. And she did it well. She did it really, really well. I want to say something, and I want to be clear about this. This story is not about Thai people being bad or Thai women being dishonest. It's not Nong as one person. What she did is something that happens everywhere in the world, in every country, in every culture, wherever there's someone who's vulnerable and someone who knows how to find them. Thailand just happens to be the place where a certain kind of Western man goes looking for something he couldn't find at home. And that makes him easier to find too. If any part of what Clyde said today felt familiar to you, if you recognize something in his story that you've seen in your own life, or someone you know, pay attention to that feeling. Don't brush it off. Because the quieter it is, the easier it is to ignore. And the easier it is to ignore, the more expensive it gets. Thank you for watching. Thank you to Clyde for telling his story. And thank you for being part of This is Thailand. Stay safe out there. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you in the next one.